Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. This year, which is coming to a close, we've been exploring the digital revolution. We might still be doing that in 2023. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. I think it'll still be going on, but we need to probe into the bigger brains of people like Christopher Lochhead, multiple best-selling author, podcaster, all-around good guy, and one of my very, very dear friends. Christopher, it is great to see you. How are you doing today?
Bob Evans, I'm stoked to see you. You look handsome as ever, although I'm a little concerned. Where's the black turtleneck? Oh, it's underneath the sweater. Oh, see, I thought it was just a t-shirt. It was kind of tucked under there. Okay, so we just added the blue sweater. Okay, well, if you want to add to the outfit, I guess you're allowed to, but the core needs to remain.
Core, yeah, the core. Don't change the core. No, Chris, folks, I got to give credit to this guy because before he came on, I had the black thing, and he said, some blue would pick up the blue in the wall, and so Chris, as if you don't do enough already. The fashion advice is terrific. So thank you.
Terrific. Anytime, Bob.
So I think there was a time long ago when the summer was slow and sort of the holiday season, things got slow. Things don't get slow around here anymore, Chris. I think there's a lot bubbling up and percolating. And I think through that wonderful, wonderful brain of yours, you have always interesting takes on things. So love to hear in December here, what is on your mind and, what do you think about it?
So at a minimum, I think we should talk about three things. One, you naming Safra Catz the cloud CEO of the year. I think that's an important topic. Two, Sam Bankman-Fried and some things about him that maybe aren't getting talked about that much.
You're a friend of his, right?
Well, we're friends on LinkedIn, but this is an interesting thing from a legal perspective. Because we're LinkedIn friends, will I be subpoenaed? Does that mean anything?
Well, I think people are going to be coming to you to chase some of that cash that he says he no longer has. Well, hey, Chris Lochhead's his buddy. How about him?
So maybe we're going ahead here, but so I listened to a bunch of these interviews. This guy went on a press tour like no other, which is part of the connection between him and Princess Markle and Prince Hanson.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll get to that connection in a second. But so we just had Jim Campbell on Follow Your Different. And Jim's the guy that wrote the book on Madoff. The book's called Madoff Talks. And he befriended Ruth Madoff. They're from the same town, as fate would have it. He's a journalist. He's got a big radio show. And so he got to meet Bernie after he was in prison. And he became Bernie Madoff's pen pal. And so he wrote this book, Madoff Talks, which is riveting. I think it should be mandatory in all business schools and mandatory reading for anybody in a regulatory kind of a job. Okay. Anyway, when this Sam Bankman-Fried FTX thing blew up, I reached out to Jim and I said, "Hey, are you tracking this?" And of course he was, because he was the first guy to interview Spitzer Elliot Spitzer after his fall from grace, and he's been the man on the spot with a lot of these scandals. He was right there on Enron. Anyway. So we had a fantastic conversation, Jim and I, about this guy, SBF. And long story longer, I asked Jim, in the history of these kinds of corporate scandals, because he's the learned one, have we ever seen anybody go on this kind of a tour? And just to be clear, this guy seems to have given over 20 podcast interviews since his company declared bankruptcy. And he did it with the Wall Street Journal. He did it with the New York Times at their big deal book conference, showed up from Bahamas on Zoom. And what Jim said to me is, we've never had a corporate criminal, a white collar criminal, go on any kind of a speaking tour like this before.
Well, Chris, I don't know. I got to defer to you since you're sort of connected to the guy, but it is weird.
I'm not connected to the guy. Okay. We're friends on LinkedIn. That's my connection.
Sure. No, I think for reasons of self-preservation and my sanity, I've tried to limit how much I listen to or read about that guy. But to me, I get the impression he thinks it's all a big joke, right? Like he was playing a video game somewhere and the other team racked up more points. Um, I I don't know either that, Chris, or he's an astonishingly good liar. He seems to me, from the little bit I've seen, to think it's like, hey, I got smoked out here. It happens. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's, as they say, move on.
Yeah, well, move on. It's 8 to 10 billion, and there are many people talking about there's a ripple effect that could be significantly larger. So we won't know for a period of time how big this thing really is. But if you believe the charges against him by the U.S. government, they are clearly stating that this was not what had been speculated, which is, he has two firms. One's an exchange, one's a trading firm, which of course is a conflict of interest in of itself. And that one, the Alameda got into trouble, and so the exchange FTX lent Alameda some money, and things unraveled, and he thought he could put Humpty Dumpty back together quickly, and it just got away from him. That's one scenario. There's another scenario that said that, well, he was also the creator of his own coin, and so maybe there was some sort of manipulation with customers' money of the coin to try to create fake stability in that coin, et cetera, et cetera. So there are all these theories about how maybe this guy was a well-intentioned guy who got into a little bit of trouble, did something, quote unquote, on or over the margin, and things got away from him. Well, the government says that's not the case. The government says this was the scam from the start. And so it appears this is if the government's right, and again, more information is coming out almost daily. We'll find out more as time goes on. But if their charges are directionally correct, and if you believe John Ray, who is now the CEO of FTX, who was the cleanup CEO at Enron, what a career this guy's having. Unbelievable. I mean that in a laudatory way. Then this is not the case. Here's one. Here, we'll get to it. We'll get to an Oracle connection. You ready for this?
I'm a little afraid, but yes.
It came out. John Ray said in his testifying in front of the Senate that FTX was still using QuickBooks. And as you may know, I have some friends at Oracle NetSuite, and they sponsored my podcast for years. And so I couldn't help myself. I could not help myself. I found a clip on Twitter of two talking heads on CNBC sort of talking about the insanity of a multi-billion-dollar crypto exchange using QuickBooks. And I tweeted something to the effect of, maybe never would have happened if they upgraded to NetSuite. You got to find humor in the gallows. But the point being that it looks like there's a very good possibility here that this was a crime from the beginning. And one of the very interesting things about this, so what Jim helped me do was compare and contrast what he knows about Madoff, which is extraordinary, probably more than just about anybody, and what we know so far about SBF. And one of the interesting things is, if you remember, Madoff's sons turned him in once they found out. And Madoff, while not acting alone, acted as close to alone as possible. He had a legit company on one floor and an illegit company on another floor. And the Ponzi scheme, illegitimate company, very few people had access to any of it, including his kids. Jim does not believe that his wife or his children knew about the scam. And as a result, or maybe partially as a result, Bob, when Madoff was arrested, he immediately admitted guilt. The scenario we have here that is obviously radically different is once this guy got caught. First of all, he wasn't caught. His exchange blew up on his face, and when it first started to happen, the CEO of a competitive exchange said he was concerned about the company and was taking all of his money off FTX, and that caused a run. And SBF said, "Oh no, nothing to see here. There's no little man behind the curtain." And then the next day, literally tweeted, "Oh fuck, I think this is a problem."
Yeah, yeah. Well, Chris, the guy.
And so my point is that not only did the guy not admit defeat the way Madoff did, he went on what was plus or minus a 3 or 4 week speaking tour.
Yeah, yeah. It's just extraordinary. I have read quite a bit about what the new CEO Ray has said, and I assume this guy's coming in as the CEO of this firm. If there's any chance to save it, he's going to try to save it. But he's also, as you said, from his history, his reputation with Enron, other things. He said, "I've never seen anything like this," and he's been saying that every day. I think we've sort of hit the bottom, and I can't be astonished anymore at how incredibly lax everything here was. But he said, "I continue to be surprised." So, Chris, I was scribbling just a second ago. There's a line from Midsummer Night's Dream, and it's just before the goofs out in the woods go and put their little play on, and so the head troublemaker says, "Now let us their fair pageant see. Lord, what fools these mortals be." And that can get to be depressing. You read about this SBF guy, and you get some understanding of how he thinks, or how his brain works, what he thinks of right and wrong, and all that. But then you see so many extraordinary things at the other end of the spectrum, thank goodness, to restore some faith in humanity, younger generations, all of that. Anyway, I don't mean to go overboard with this, but when you talk about that 8-10 billion, the chain that could cascade to other people, the individual people who got bilked in this, and that's just gone forever. I mean, this is not some goofy victimless crime thing. This is a horrendous mess that's been created.
Yes.
Here. So,
yes, and we'll see what we saw with Madoff is what Jim anticipates, which is there were people who were highly overweight in this stuff, and therefore big customers who have lost, if not all, then meaningful parts of their life savings. And these are very real people who made this investment trusting that things were a certain way, and they were not. And the other part of this, so I think there's two big things. One is, I think the way the press has reacted to this guy is disgusting, in that, they've given him a free pass, and they've called this a Greek tragedy, and they've said this and that. It's like, no. This is called a crime.
Yeah.
To your point, a very serious fucking crime committed by what appears to be, if you believe the initial reports, and again, I don't know anything that anybody else doesn't know that isn't publicly available, but a calculated crime architected and executed by a very sophisticated criminal whose parents are Stanford law professors.
Yeah.
So that's the first piece. And people say, well, the press didn't do this properly. I would agree. And what's worse, not only did the press not uncover it, which, is fine. The press can't uncover all scams. But after it came out, there was and still to this day, there's some laudatory press towards this guy. And to your point, it's time to make crime illegal in the United States of America.
Yes. I agree with the express and the underlying value of what you said there, Chris. So, I just from what you were just saying there, I want to just think back on, because you started to bring Bernie Madoff in this, and I was thinking, wow, okay, so we're sort of dredging up the rogues gallery here. But your discussion about what your buddy, the author Jim Campbell, has said, that Madoff, Jim doesn't think that Madoff's wife or children, adult children, knew about what he was doing. So if that is true, I have no reason to think it isn't true, but imagine what was going on in this one person's brain, Madoff, right? Legit company, illegit company. He's got his brain probably partitioned off, right? This is what I can say to people. This is what I can't say. Tell my wife, tell my children. and I'm just amazed at the human brain. I'm just glad that there seems to, I think we're at 50-50, Chris. Maybe I want to have it tilt more toward good, but people whose brains are altered in ways that push toward the good and doing right things, as opposed to, some other people just say, no, I can pull off this scam. Nobody will know. I won't tell anybody. That had to be utterly exhausting. How do you do that within
So it's
your?
interesting you bring that up because Jim and I talked about that. And you might recall a little while back, we had on Follow Your Different a gal who goes by a pseudonym, M.E. Thomas. And she is purported to be the first psychopath, sociopath to come public and declare herself as such. And she wrote a book called Confessions of a Sociopath, which I did my best to read. It's a tough read. And one of the things that Emmy says, well, first she says that the connection between psychopathy and violence is not proven. So she argues that not only is a psychopath less likely to be violent than a normal brain person, but is or more likely is actually less likely. And her reason for saying that, and I'm just parroting what she told me, so I'm just telling you. She says that a psychopath is highly self-oriented, highly egocentric, and practices situational ethics. That is to say, will do whatever they think is right in the moment for them, even if it conflicts with something they said 2 moments ago. So unlike you and I, who could make a commitment to each other, and if it became a little less convenient to honor that commitment, as honorable people we more than likely would, psychopaths will just decide in a moment whatever's right in that moment. So she said that's the reason that psychopaths are a lot less likely to be violent, because they know that being violent would put them in jail, and they don't want to be in jail, and they're very egotistical. I don't know whether that's right or not. That's just her statement. Here's the other statement she made. Approximately 1 in 100 people are psychopaths. And if you Google around, you'll see that number. I don't know how the fuck you know that. I don't know who knows that. But if any of this is remotely close to directionally right, there is a certain type of person who does have the primary trait of a psychopath is a no emotional empathy, as she described it. They have intellectual empathy. So when you say to her, oh, something horrible just happened on that, there was a school shooting or a war or what, any horrible thing that happens in our world, I'm somebody who, when I fire up my browser in the morning and hear there's been a school shooting in our country, I tear up. Well, that doesn't happen for her. She says intellectually she understands it's terrible, but she doesn't tear up. And so there's a chance what's going on here is, and again, I don't know, but that these folks have almost a psychopathy around this. What Jim said to me is Madoff knew, of course, he was writing this book about him, and that's why they were pen pals. And Madoff blamed his situation on the investors. Madoff said they were greedy. They wanted returns. They should have known better. I was just trying to make everybody happy. They pushed me to do this. And in a very real way, as crazy as it might seem to you and I, the reason Madoff became Jim's pen pal was he was hoping that Jim's book would somehow exonerate Madoff.
If I only had the opportunity to tell people what really was going on.
And so what Jim said is these kinds of characters got to where they got to because they can talk. Bernie Madoff was the chairman of NASDAQ. You cannot be more sort of honored in Wall Street to be the chairman of one of the major exchanges, went to all the ding-dong parties, all the ding-dong charity events at the ding-dong museums with all the celebrities and all the politicians and you name it. And the interesting thing is, that's what this guy did too. Draped himself in celebrity, draped himself in politics, draped himself in an aura of trust. Stanford law parents, went to the best schools, super smart whiz bang kid. Even the image with the roughly t-shirts and the crazy hair is all part of this sort of almost Einstein-esque geniusy vibe thing going on.
Yeah.
And so they're able to create this aura of ultimate trust, which in Jim's words is exactly how they're able to perpetrate these crimes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And then also, Chris, on a much shallower note, but that's also something I could just see the way the media is today, that they would say, oh, but he's so cool. And, what was that term he came up with? Something like effective philanthropy or some bullshit thing like this.
It was some professor had, no, he had wrapped himself in, I'm going to give this all away. And the only reason I did this was the genius that I am. When I was at MIT, I took these astrophysics courses, and what I learned is if I could make $20 zillion in 10 minutes, I could donate all the money, and I would become the JP Morgan meets Mother Teresa of the modern era, and all this bullshit.
Yeah,
it was really good bullshit.
They just gobbled that up. But I think, as much as I tried to avoid it, I caught some glimpses of his post-collapse media tour, podcast tour that you referred to. And I know in one of them, he just came out and admitted it. He used the term shibboleth. He said, if you just are willing to utter the right shibboleths in the right way enough times to the right people, he said, you build up this veneer, you got it, man. They will give you the credibility that you're seeking. So back to your thread of these guys are able to do this because they're good talkers.
Yes.
Chris,
and what Jim thinks is the reason he went on this talking tour. So when something like this happens, the perpetrator of it has a choice to make. You can either say you're completely incompetent or you're a criminal. And so SBF clearly chose incompetent and said, oh, I was only a kid. I was only in my 20s. He just recently, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, turned 30, and I didn't know any better. And he had, I got to a point where I couldn't listen to him anymore because the answers to his questions, listen, I'm not the dumbest guy in the world. I do drink a lot, but he would give these questions. So my favorite question, of course, is, where's the money, Lebowski? And his answer to the question, I can't even recreate the answer. I mean, it is the most unbelievable connection of Bisno, Wall Street, trader, crypto, pseudo-intellectual mumbo jumbo. But the answer is, the dog ate my homework. That's the answer.
Yeah.
And here's what I know. If the dog ate that guy's homework, that dog shit is the most valuable dog shit in the history of dog shit. Now, let's get to what everybody's getting wrong about this. A lot of people are saying, oh, this is the end of crypto. This is the end of crypto. I believe his name is Brian Johnson, the CEO of Coinbase, just came out, took their numbers radically down for next year. Their stock tanked, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is the end of crypto. This is the end of crypto. This is the end of crypto. This is not the end of crypto. As a matter of fact, in some ways, you need something like this, although God only knows it didn't have to be at this scale, to get regulators focused on what they need to be focused on. But here's the aha. Native digitals think analog money is stupid. And in a native digital world, they're right. And the amount of analog toll takers there are in the financial system who add almost no or no value whatsoever simply to move money around is incredible. And so the promise of blockchain and crypto, in my mind, remains. And what we have here is a classic situation where when something's new, when something's generally not well understood, and when something's generally not regulated, you're going to end up here. So I think in the end of the day, the crypto world will be stronger for this because we'll get some of the regulation that we have that make some of these things hard. Although Madoff proved you can get away with bad shit in the legacy world very easily. But I think it's a mistake to say this is the end of crypto. And I'm not a buyer yet, and I'm no stockbroker, and I'm certainly not giving anybody any investment advice. However, I will be in the near to medium term future. I will begin to buy some crypto for sure, because it just, the long term category potential is not changed, in my opinion, in spite of what's going on here.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
Now,
Well,
here's my fear. So the government's going to get actively involved, and the government's going to create regulation. So do you remember, Bob, I believe it was 2015, maybe 2016, somewhere in there, when Zuckerberg was called to testify in front of Congress? Do you remember that?
I do.
Do you remember when members of Congress who are elected to govern the greatest country in the world, asked him questions like, well, if Mr. Zuckerberg, if nobody pays for your service, how do you make money? And he said, well, I think it was Orrin Hatch, Senator Orrin Hatch, if I'm not mistaken. He said, well, Senator Hatch, we sell ads. And that's why they were there, to talk about how they do that. And so you have a situation where there are people in Congress who have their emails, quote unquote, printed out to them, because they don't call them emails, they call them memos, and handed to them by, quote unquote, assistants or, God forbid, secretaries. And then they dictate the response, to which the, quote unquote, secretary responds to the, quote unquote, memo. And so I think one of the challenges we are now going to have is, very recently, the government in our country was debating whether or not they try to shut crypto down or empower it and surround it with a proper regulation. Just that, the fact that that was a question, shows us how far out of touch our lawmakers are with the digital world that you and I live in.
Yeah. Yeah. I sure agree with you. Well, my hope on it is a little Hippocratic oathy, which is, I hope the harm that they do is minimal, and but I don't expect that, and I just hope that, in the 2 or 3 years it'll take them to figure out how to mess things up, that advances will be made and things can be calmed down. But Chris, if it's okay, this is really fascinating, and I'm not at all surprised that you got into this in ways with people like Jim Campbell, the author, who was on, your show, and pulling together these very different threads about it. And this point you've made at the end here, like, this was an individual, this was not an industry, this was not a technology problem, it's not a crypto problem, this was an individual problem. So yeah, I hope we don't get into
when the truth comes out, there'll be more than one individual. So it will probably be many individuals. However, I know many of the people in the crypto industry. I know some of the investors and entrepreneurs who've been in the industry since it became the category that it started. And look, you can always be wrong about somebody, of course, but in general, I believe there are many, many very talented, incredible entrepreneurs, technologists, software developers, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and so forth, trying to authentically do good things here. Are they all Mother Teresa? No. Listen, the free market is a good motivator. So I think there's a lot of good people in crypto. And the interesting thing is, when you have the realization that the government literally doesn't know enough to regulate this, it creates a fascinating dilemma, which is, what's the role of the industry? What is the role of the senior leadership, whether it's in academia or the venture community, the banking and financial industry, to come together and try to deal with some of this? Because I think that senators who have their memos printed out for them are not the kinds of people that we should be. And I know we spend a lot of money trying to influence these people, but fucking A, they haven't even heard of Venmo.
Who?
Yeah, exactly.
Chris, when I was many decades ago, when I was a cub reporter, I got to go to this presentation that a guy, he was at the time the chairman of the FCC, his name was Reed Hunt. I just thought he was a jackass of the highest order. But one of the things he was talking about here, he said, this legislation that, the FCC has worked with the Senate to enact here, this legislation to help regulate and control the cable industry, will have far-reaching benefits for customers, to the point we've even gone in and mandated how many times a phone ringing at a customer service center at a cable operator, how many times the phone can ring before it has to be answered. And even as, dumb and narrow-minded, shallow-minded as I was at the time, I thought, wait a minute, how are they're going to hire people to watch how many times? So anyway, because I don't have a lot of hope there.
But in point of fact, what they did was they created duopolies, right? In my town, which is not a big town, but it's not a small town, there's one choice for high-speed internet, period. Or you can do satellite, or you can do a local provider who's, I don't know, I think best offering is maybe half the speed.
Yeah.
So if you want high-speed internet where I live, you're doing business with Comcast. And as we know, Comcast and United are in a death match for who can be the most hated company in America. But they're government protected, duopoly is probably a nice way of saying it. Now, here's the other interesting thing. So as all of this is happening, we have this unprecedented situation where this 30-year-old man goes and does a massive amount of public relations, trying to convince the world that he was stupid, not criminal or evil, and stave off being arrested. And we've never seen this before. And Jim Campbell said it on our podcast, and others have said it in many other ways, that they can't imagine there would be a lawyer in the world that would tell this guy to go do this. Plus, he did at least one major tweet storm, and he was fairly active on Twitter for much of this time period. And so you think, okay, so why are they doing this? Well, Jim's thesis was the one I mentioned, which is they're talkers, so they think they can talk their way out of it. Okay, that makes sense. Here's the difference between SBF and Madoff. SBF is a native digital. He's 30 years old. He was born in I'm forgetting the date. Anyway, he was born when you and I were not exactly, you and I were barely young at the time.
92, 93, somewhere in there?
Somewhere in there. We were certainly far out of diapers. But so why does he do this? Okay, so just let that cook in your head for a second. And I accept the Jim answer. That's probably a big part of the answer. But then the whole world right now is a kerfuffle about the Meghan Markle, Prince Harry Netflix special series or whatever the fuck it is, right? And I saw yesterday it's the #1 thing on Netflix, and apparently most of the excited kingdom thinks it's horrible and thinks she's horrible, and Meghan Markle is a hamster is trending on Twitter and all this sort of stuff, right? So I thought, and I'm not into these royals or celebrities, or I don't know, honey. I could give a flying fuck.
Come on, former Canadian. You don't just swoon over all.
As I always say when I meet somebody else from the Commonwealth, I say, "Hey, man, the Queen's on our money too." But anyway, I thought, okay, well, let me see what all the kerfuffle's about. So I turned this thing on. Well, I can only handle about 20 minutes.
20 minutes? You made it that long?
Oh, I was trying to hold in the pocket.
Wow.
But here's what I'll just relay my experience. It's roughly 20 minutes of them talking to themselves in their iPhones, so they decide that it's what is happening is so consequential for the world that they need to have video journals of whatever of their journey. See a video journal of our journey. And Princess Markle says something to the effect of, we're sick and tired of everybody else telling our story, so we have to tell our story. And
Sure.
that's right after she talks about how disgusting it is that they were attacked and hounded nonstop by the paparazzi, and they just want to be left alone. So it's like, okay, let's stop here for a second. First of all, who gives a shit about your story? This is one of the biggest myths perpetuated on this generation, which is that you need to get on social media and share your journey, share your story. No one cares. Nobody fucking cares. And we have the proof for our most recent book. We studied all the best-selling nonfiction books by category, and the two top categories by a mile, you and I talked about this, personal growth and development and personal finance, not biographies. No one cares. And look, are there some people who, oh, I love to see the intimate moments of them behind the closed doors and Meghan Markle with her hair up in a towel and like, really? That's where your life's at. Okay. You want to see Meghan Markle in a towel in her hair. All right. And that today, if you noticed, everybody's a professional fucking victim today. So they're victims of the horrible, evil monarchy. And maybe the monarchy is horrible and evil. I don't know. I never spent a day with the queen or now the king, or I have no idea. And I pay zero attention. Maybe they are the world's most horrible people. I have no idea. But you don't have to get on social media and tell everybody all this stuff. So I don't know what's going on today with this need to expose oneself at a radical level. And everybody's a professional victim today. And everybody needs to get on social media and tell everybody how they've been victimized, as if we give a fuck. And so the two things are connected in my mind, in that we've never had this kind of radical insight into some royal idiots. And we've never had a criminal at this scale be so radically public. Now, what do these two have in common? All three of them are native digitals. And so here's the aha. Now that we're in a native digital world, does this mean when people do something stupid or off-putting, I think most people think about how they threw the queen under the bus as she was dying as pretty shitty. Even if she was a horrible person, I have no idea. But you know what? We were all in mourning. The people of the UK thought she was wonderful. And so let's say she wasn't wonderful. I have no idea. But throwing her under the bus after she's dead, so it just seems ridiculous to me. And all the comments they've made in this I have to expose this in my life, and I'm this victim, and woe is me, and this and that and the other. And then you have SBF doing what I find a similar thing, which is, oh, woe is me. I didn't know. A dog ate my homework. Some other people, et cetera, et cetera. And now, after whatever the incident is, in their case, their desire to leave the monarchy so they could live their life in peace on social media and Netflix. And this guy who just got it wrong, made a mistake, and all I want to do is work to get it right. And so I'm going to go on a speaking tour for 12 hours a day. There's some kind of digital social media exhibitionism around malfeasance, and of course, what Harry and Markle did, maybe not malfeasance, but certainly bizarre. And so there's this desire to look like I got to live all of it online.
Well, your brilliant discussions over the past several months about native digitals and what native analogs kind of need to learn to be able to adapt to this coming new native digital world. I hope we native analogs can leave that part out. I don't aspire to that thread of at least that some native digitals have. Excuse me. But Chris, the notion of victimhood, and then that's one thing, but that's an individual choice. I find what's more troubling is that there's a fair amount of acceptance of these things in the public, right? I don't know what Princess Markle and whoever that guy is, I don't know what they ever did or didn't do, but did I see some number didn't Netflix pay them a fairly serious amount of money? Is it 50 million, 100 million now? Could have been 10 billion. Gave him a lot of shares in SBF's company.
Yeah, I think that's what they were paid in, actually.
But they still, I wish, but they still, assert I'm a victim. Well, how did you get to be known? I guess the guy was he served in the British military for a while, and But they never, what did they ever do? I don't get it. But then they take this money and claim they're victims. So it's kind of nauseating. But as always, Christopher, you bring a very, very interesting perspective on this. I think especially that notion of, the trends of the native digitals, some of them fantastic, some of them okay, some of them not so good. But we, the business world at large, pardon me, we need to be more aware of that. And I think these discussions are always interesting. And I really like this thread you've drawn from people that you'd sure want to spend a lot of time with, right? Bernie Madoff to SBF to Princess and Princess Markle.
By the way, I just Googled if CBSnews.com is correct. They're saying that the company signed a multi-year production deal estimated to be worth 100 to 150 million, according to Dateline and U.S. Weekly, as reported by CBS News.
And all they want is to be left alone.
I just want to be left alone. And if you pay me 150 million dollars, I'll video myself brushing my teeth. But this is the insanity of it. And the interesting thing that I think will be powerful to watch is when you decide to be so transparent about your journey, you leave all these digital breadcrumbs. And there was some debate online about why did the FBI move on Sam Bankman-Fried the day before he was going to testify, and there's been a lot of speculation about that.
Pure coincidence. Pure coincidence.
Well, look, here's what I don't know. What I know enough about law enforcement to know that there are always things that we don't know. So, for example, there could have been they could have had credible evidence that he was about to go to Argentina, or So, in my mind, it seems like it would have been a good thing to have him testify under oath for 6 to 8 hours in front of the U.S. Congress. However, there are a couple of things. One, there might have been a reason to do it that we're not aware of. Two, the interesting thing is, and I heard this, and I think it's fascinating. I think it's an important point. He has given so many interviews and done so much tweeting that prosecutors might have said, "Hey, we got all we need. We don't even need to talk to this guy. This guy told us everything we need to know." So, and so there is an element of, my father used to say to me, "Hey, don't forget, you can't unring the bell." And, by the way, listen to somebody in Congress talk about the cloud. And you're going to know, well, somewhere I don't know where it is. It's in the cloud somewhere. So anyway, I think it shows the ramifications of living a radically digital life that I think you got to remember the good words of Bruce Lochhead, who said you can't unring the cloud, or you can't unring the bell, and you can't unring the cloud. So if you post that photo of your junk on spankme.com, it might haunt you forever.
and you can risk it that then people want to hear about the transparency of the journey that led you to do that. And, maybe wow.
No one cares.
Well, this time, as always, has flown by. Thank you, sir. This is not many people on this good earth could tie together Bernie Madoff in the way you did with SBF, with the Farkles to, pull this together in such a unique way. But I thought it was fantastic.
Well, thanks, Bob. All the best of the holiday season and the new year to you and your family. Happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, happy Christmas, happy all the things that we should be happy about.
And can I tell you a secret before we go?
Yes, sir.
Anybody? Gonna have another grandchild in June.
Wow. Making more people.
Good people.
Yeah.
Good people.
That's exciting. We most people don't realize that we need more good people.
We do, especially the good ones. The good ones, yep. Big booming market for them, Christopher.
Maybe that's what we need some regulation on. Should there be an IQ test to procreate?
Oh, I didn't hear what you said there. We are going to put the big bow on this. It's fantastic. My good friend, Christopher, very, very Merry Christmas to you.
Love you, Bob.
Thanks a million. Always a treat.
Thank you, brother.
Bye, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Folks, thanks to all of you for being with us here at Cloud Wars Live, and our good friend Christopher Lochhead taking us down some interesting roads that we probably haven't been down before. Might not want to go back again, but it was a fantastic journey. See you next time.